Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I was out doing a photo shoot and I've kind of got back. I've got a bit of a headache and I don't really feel like streaming, so I decided that today was the day for me to film a video that I've actually wanted to film for quite some time, and I think a lot of people have wanted me to make a video like this for even longer, so I'm very excited to finally be doing this. In the about 3 years that I have been working in esports, I've gone through phases of different levels of popularity in different places, which is fine and understandable, but one thing that has been extremely consistent in terms of people's opinions of me has always been how people feel about my esports notes. And this was something that I used to post a lot of pictures on social media, on my Twitter, on Instagram, whatever, and it really took people's interests. I think not just because I gained a bit of a reputation for being so thorough with my notes, but also the fact that a lot of my notes are very pretty. And people would always ask me about it, and it became a bit of a cult thing. And so I thought today I would go through some of the notes that I have made over my 3 years in this career, and talk a little bit about them. And they have changed over time. The way that I do them has changed, obviously, but I've managed to gather up as much as I can. Now, I am fully prepared to accept that there may be more in my bedroom that I just have forgotten exist, but as it stands, oh my God, this is my pile of notebooks that I've used over the years. And not only that, in 2020, I started using my iPad for making notes. So there are about 1,000 pages of notes on my iPad. Oh, hey, look, I still have this European League background, even though I stopped working on the European League over a year ago. So there's a lot here, and I don't know how much I can get through or in what order it's all supposed to be. So I'm gonna try and do what I can remember. So the first ones I want to show, and this might be kind of funny to people who are not OGs of my career, and that's totally okay, but when I first stepped foot in anything in broadcast and was doing it on an amateur level, I was actually hosting. I wasn't casting. Ow. Now, a lot of people know me as that person who refuses to host, no interest in hosting. Anytime someone asks me about it, I'm like, nope, I'm not doing it. And it might seem kind of strange that I have a bunch of hosting notes, but the reason is I really wanted to cast, but I was really worried. Like, I was super scared of failure. I was scared that people were gonna laugh at me or think I didn't know what I was talking about. So I decided to start off with hosting. I had done YouTube for a long time, and I knew that I would have the skill set necessary to be a host. And it was a few months down the line that I actually, you know, got to the point where I was brave enough to actually cast. Now, this back in the day was in Overwatch. Overwatch was the first esport that I worked in, and so we have a lot of hosting notes, hosting, little Overwatch symbol, other games. Oh. So these will have all been from the tail end of 2018, which is before I was doing anything professionally. Oh my God, wow. Okay, so oh man. Okay, so these were for, in this one that I've just opened, these were summaries of important things that happened in Overwatch these weeks, and like my little analysis of them so that I can make YouTube videos about them. And actually that was my in to esports. There's a fun fact. I made these videos called This Week in Overwatch, where I was talking about important things that had happened, and then it was those YouTube videos that I used as a show reel to actually get on a broadcast in the first place. So yeah, this really was the first ever notebook, this one. So a lot of these ones will have pages that look like this, where basically it would have the team that I needed to know about, the players, and important things about them. And then these were my analysis / story notes. And this is what I would base hosting a desk off of, and the kinds of things that I wanted to talk to my analysts about. And then these notes were the notes that I would make in game. So game 1, game 2, I would make notes on what I thought were like the biggest things. And these were actually the basis of the questions that I would ask the analysts. This is so weird. So yeah, that's how I would structure a lot of my questions. I wouldn't read them word for word, but that's just how I like to write things down. And then the notes that I actually made in the game were often a lot messier. And then I would write very big I would like draw boxes around the points that I'd written down that I thought were the most important, and then, you know, like discuss with the analysts what they wanted to talk about. So a lot of these notebooks are not pretty. These are messy. The funny thing is, actually, this notebook I wrote some stuff in recently for some content, so I actually have some really recent like YouTube content planning and Valorant stuff in here as well. Like new 100 Thieves roster. Nothing to do with Overwatch. Definitely didn't write that in 2018. Okay, so again, I don't know what order the notebooks come at this point, so we're just gonna pick them. This was another one from the Overwatch era, obviously. And I think I used this to... Oh, wait, this has got some Rainbow Six stuff in it. So actually, this may have been a little bit later on. I think this was very early in me starting to study Rainbow Six because I have... Oh my god, this was me planning my first ever Rainbow Six video, which was at the end of 2019. It was about Na'Vi. And I, like, was doing my very first ever attempts at analysis of Rainbow Six. I have a lot of these in many of my notebooks, where basically I write things specifically designed to be easy to find the important things. And then if I feel like there's a lot of writing on the page, I will stick extra bits in to summarize the actual important things so that I know what I'm meant to be saying. Especially as back here at the very beginning of my attempts to like analyze Rainbow Six, I would write analysis round by round because I was still trying to get an idea of like the correct way to analyze Rainbow Six. And I would write things like all the compositions they had and whatever, stuff that like after a certain amount of time you just don't need to write down anymore. So this was Overwatch. Hangzhou versus Shanghai, so that's Overwatch League. Oh my god, look at this. Main points, and it is just a huge fucking thing that of red text that is full of timestamps. I wrote like a billion timestamps here. More Rainbow Six analysis. So yeah, I think this was from sort of towards the end of me doing Overwatch. We have some Overwatch World Cup stuff. I used to draw all of the little like flags for each of the players so I could like easily reference stuff like that. When I started to learn Call of Duty and I was learning the spawn points for all of these different maps in Black Ops 4. So yeah, I would write all sorts of stuff like that. So that's this one. So I had some really small notebooks like this. I have Apex Legends, Rainbow Six Siege, Call of Duty. So this was still when I was like doing Overwatch mostly, but I was trying to sort of learn some of the other games that I thought I might be interested in at the time. And I didn't want to clog up all of my main notebooks with, you know, stuff that was kind of irrelevant. The Apex Legends one is actually basically empty. I have this on the first page and that's like it. I just never ended up like getting into Apex. Rainbow Six, I think, has got like a decent amount of stuff in it. This is when I was working on the ESL Prem, which actually I think was the last season of ESL Prem that there was. So I have bits about like, you know, week one. I've got some like notes about the teams and some story notes. Again, like compositions and stuff like that teams use. So this was very early in me really trying to learn a lot about, you know, the story behind these Rainbow Six teams and how to analyze them. This was week 2. Yeah, I think, you know, I would write notes. These were per round, right? So this was a different way of me like making notes on rounds, but I was trying to find an efficient way of making notes about Rainbow Six that didn't involve me writing like a fucking essay for every single round. So you'll see like different things in my notes where I'm like trying different ways of writing things down. We got some stuff on the M&M story and how they were like the underdog team. Oh, and actually, yeah, when I was trying to like learn a bunch about all of the operators in the back of this book, I've written a ton of things about each of the operators, ops that they synergize with, and I did it for not every operator. I think I got bored after a while and I was just learning too fast to need to write all of this down. But yeah, I do remember doing a lot of these pages. Then I have the Call of Duty one because I was really interested in working in Call of Duty. I don't know how long my Call of Duty era kind of lasted. I never really did much in Call of Duty. It was just kind of like poor timing where I was really interested in working in it. There just weren't any opportunities in Call of Duty, and that was kind of that. You know, I have stuff like Heretics versus E United and hardpoint frequency, S&D gridlock and stuff like that. You know, like I was super interested in Call of Duty, but didn't really end up working much in it. Okay, so now we're getting to like the heftier notebooks, which have way more stuff in them. So I'm just gonna start with this small one because I don't really remember a ton that was in here. Oh, okay. So this was another notebook that was specifically for the purpose of being able to write about a bunch of different games in. So each of these separated things were meant to be on a different game. So the first game in here actually is FIFA. And that might sound kind of strange because like you might think, Gio, like why have you got FIFA notes? I did one FIFA gig. I have never been a football person. I don't know anything about football. I didn't really grow up with it. But I was hired to cast FIFA with an actual like football broadcaster. He, you know, had worked on like football TV, like his, you know, for so long. And I just wanted to know the bare minimum rules of football. So I was like looking up stuff about like different metas and stuff in FIFA and like these different formations and why teams would pick them. So I drew all of these different formations out and wrote a bunch of reasons why a team like might pick them, what the pros and cons of these different formations were. I didn't actually end up needing to use them a ton when I came to cast this game. I just actually, funnily enough, ended up just using things that I knew from other games. Even though I specialize in first-person shooters, I used a lot of knowledge that I knew from other games to be able to make comments on things that were happening in this game. Like, I think once you get into the habit of seeing video games through the lens of like, if this person positions in this way, like, what are the consequences of that? So I didn't really need to know football very in depth to be able to make those kinds of comments. So I actually didn't need those notes a ton. The next one is Splitgate. So when Splitgate first came out, I casted, what was their league even called? Whatever their league was called at the time, I casted some of that with I Hold Shift, who's one of the VCT casters. We casted a bunch of things together. We did Overwatch Contenders together. We did some Call of Duty together. We did Splitgate together. So I casted with him a bunch over the years. Oh, Divergence. That's what it was called. Right. Okay. So I wrote a load about the tournament structure in here, the different maps. I wrote a bunch of notes about what had happened on the previous weeks so that I would be able to talk about these teams and things that they had done and, you know, have some like story going into the week that we were doing. I was writing a bunch of notes about the maps themselves because I remember at the time I hadn't really had a lot of time to actually play the game myself, which is very difficult to go into a new game when you haven't had a bunch of time to play the game yourself, because you're not necessarily going to have natural intuitive understanding of really basic things like the layout of a map, for example. So I was really trying to study these and study like what guns were available at different points in the different things, you know. There was a 2 versus 2 tournament, apparently I did, and stuff like that. The next one is Apex Legends. Again, so I ended up, okay, so this is all notes actually about the different legends in Apex Legends. So my experience with Apex Legends is at the very beginning of my esports career, I worked on an Apex Legends show that EA actually commissioned, and I've casted one Apex Legends game ever. So I never ended up really having anything to do with Apex Legends. So a lot of this was just me writing down stats, like weapon statistics, things like that, so that I had that there, but I didn't end up really needing it for much. Okay, so the next one is Rainbow Six Siege. So this must have been probably the earliest Siege notes that I was making. I was trying to make notes about like the different roles you have, because I was coming from Overwatch where like roles within a team were super strict, and in Siege it's not quite the same. Like there's a bit more flexibility in it, and the roles are not set by the game. The roles are kind of set by just how the game has evolved. So it's like there's nothing in the game that says you need to play with a hard breach, but the understanding that you have a hard breach and you have that hard support is just kind of part of the social aspect of the game. And that was something that was very alien to me, because coming from Overwatch where the roles were set by the game was a very different environment. So I was trying to learn about that. These were notes I was making on Raleigh. So this was the Raleigh Major back in August 2019. I would draw all of like the little symbols for the operators and stuff, because I was trying to like, you know, get used to that. And I should say, like, I had played Rainbow Six, like I played Rainbow Six in the beta, and I actually bought the game in 2018. So I was familiar with playing the game at this point. I just wasn't familiar with like as familiar with how like the pro level of the game worked. And that was something that was very hard to convince people when I actually got to Rainbow Six. But that's, you know, that's just how that was. With my Rainbow Six notes, I used to draw a lot of like map things to help me sort of like understand what it was I was writing, because I found that Rainbow Six notes I had to be super wordy with, because like the very specifics of Rainbow Six and like Rainbow Six maps and Rainbow Six callouts and like how the map can be destructed is very hard to just get across in writing succinctly. So I would draw a lot with Rainbow Six stuff, which became really useful when I started using my iPad, because then I could just copy and paste a lot of the diagrams. Then we have a Call of Duty. So this was oh, this was actually a VOD review that I did with I Hold Shift, I think, judging by what it says in my notes. So this is, again, like round by round analysis of some game that we were watching. This was like some of the strategy behind like playing for spawns in Hardpoint. We used Arsenal and Hacienda as examples, and like how teams strategically play for spawns, which is something that I never really had like a full appreciation of until I studied this with Shift, who was very good at understanding it. So that's what all of those notes were. Then we have things like War versus Gen G. So I guess this was open bracket because War never played in like the CWL or anything. So again, this was just a lot of round by round notes and stuff like that, like very dense pages of writing. Again, I use a lot of color and I use a lot of boxes to really highlight, you know, the bits that I wanted the most attention on. The next one is PUBG. So this was for PEL contenders, which I did cast, the PUBG Europe League contenders. I stood in for like a week or something to do that. So I actually needed to write a lot of statistics and things like that specifically to use in this cast for a game I'd never played. I actually think I did a really good job that week. I'm just gonna point that out. And I would like use these tables and then color code like the teams that came first, second, third, and where, because I just find color really easy to understand things. Like, I'm not very good at just looking at loads of text and pulling things out. I'm very synesthetic. I definitely like just find color just a much easier way to join together patterns and things. So just stuff like that is like really big for me. That's why I use a lot of color. I made notes on all of the teams and just important things about the players and statistics about the teams, like their average points on each of the maps, things like that. But this was all stuff that I used as reference a lot when I was actually casting in Ukraine for this tournament. And I also had this page story, which goes on for a couple of pages, and this is about all of the different teams and the stories behind them, where they came from, how they qualified for the event, like stuff about that. And I basically did that just by, you know, watching VODs and stuff like that, and talking to a couple of people who were, you know, relevant. But there's, you know, a lot of teams in a PUBG game, so there are a lot of pages of that. And then that's kind of it for that notebook, because there weren't any other games. I want to know what this one is, because I actually don't remember. Casting, I remember what this notebook is now. So this is not actually notes on games. This was my VOD review. So like me watching my own casting back and VOD reviewing it. So I would, you know, this was like cast number 5 or whatever, and these are all the notes that I wrote for myself. So the top one is, too many stop. Speaking too fast about the attack comp, so they end up changing. So that was actually an interesting thing, is back when I was doing a lot of these VOD reviews, me speaking too quickly in my casts was a really big problem. And so doing this really helped me identify the big issues I needed to do. And then I actually also, in these pink pages, these were the VOD review comments that I had from other people who had seen my casts. And then I could kind of compare how I felt about my cast and how other people did. But when it really got real was when we get to these super colorful pages. So this was a method of VOD review that I came up with for myself that I thought would be the most useful. I came up with these different categories of things that you can do in a cast, and I color coded all of them. So the things that you could talk about were, and this is in the context of Overwatch, composition, a specific play and consequence of that play, ultimates and or economy, healing, timing, map detail, positioning, and something outside of the game. And those were my things. And so what I would do is I would watch myself cast, and I wrote down every point that I made in my cast. And then I would color code it dependent on which category it fit into. Now, the reason that I did this is because this was less about me VOD reviewing the technicalities of my cast and more about me making sure that I was talking about the things that I wanted to be talking about. As a color caster, I definitely wanted to be sure that I was talking about things and providing insightful analysis, and not just like waffling like total shit, and it just being a cast, you know? And so it also meant that I could kind of plan around specifically what things I wanted to be talking about. And so I'd be like, okay, so for me, I wanted to talk a lot of pink. That was what I specifically wanted my casts to be like. I wanted to be able to analyze the actual plays that were occurring in the game and talk about what effect they had on the game. So I knew that for me, if I had a page that had a lot of pink on it, I was probably gonna be quite happy with that. Although, you know, there should always be a balance anyway. So I just have pages and pages of these where I've considered doing this in recent times because it's been a long time since I've done anything like this, but just pages and pages of me basically transcribing my own casting, and color coding it. This was another VOD review I had from someone else, so that's why it's all in pink. More VOD review, more VOD review, more VOD review. I actually, oh man, okay, I'm not gonna show this page, but I have a page called Rival Notes, where basically other people who were casting, you know, like in similar leagues to me, who I feel like it's mean calling it rival notes, but basically other people who I thought were quite good but doing a similar level of esports to me, I would make notes on what I thought they did really well so that I could try and ensure I was doing those things really well. Yeah, I want to call it rival notes because a lot of these people were my friends, but it was just like, you know, I wanted to make sure that if someone else was really good at something, I was also really good at that thing. So again, like more VOD review, more VOD review. There's this whole notebook is just VOD review. Like, actually, this is called When to Color Cast. So this is interesting. This, I think, was me doing this color-coded method for someone else. And it doesn't say who it was who was casting, but I think it was so that I could compare how their colors would match with my average cast. And it was also really interesting because whenever I did that for another caster, you could see like things that were very specifically like characteristic to their style versus characteristic to my style. And I think that's a very important thing to consider with casting, is that you know, what you bring is not necessarily going to be the same strength that somebody else brings, but it's the fact that you have casters who offer different things is what makes it good. You wouldn't want everyone to just be good at the same thing or just have the same sort of focus in what they speak about. I would also write a lot of these like blue things. I was writing notes, like feedback notes to myself about these very specific comments. A lot of those were things like I wrote down like the analysis or the point that I made in the cast, and then the little blue notes were like me elaborating on that. So I was trying to encourage myself to not just give a superficial analysis, but to actually like dive deeper into like the next level of conclusion that you can draw. And that was a habit I was really trying to bring. But anyway, I have pages and pages of that, and that's what this notebook was for. This notebook was actually kind of my holy grail for a long time. It's totally destroyed, like at the bottom. I actually hate spiral bound notebooks as well, but I love these subject dividers, which is why I kept getting these. So this was all Overwatch, if I remember correctly. And each divider was for a different thing. So for example, this first one was for story. And so I just had a ton of story notes that were all like in this part of this notebook, and I could always go back and refer to them, or I could add more and I could study them. We have this, like tons more of these little things that were stuck in. By this point, I was working on Contenders China. So a lot of this stuff is for specific games that I was casting for Overwatch Contenders China. So for example, there's T1W versus ELG, and I would write like specific story things about them. The next one was content. So this was anything I wanted to be making on YouTube, and the specific planning for that content, which is something that I've continued on. Is like I have specific like content notes and stuff. Even if a lot of it is analysis, I think it's just good to have that. This is like so much tiny writing so that I could fit it all onto like these pages. And like these were like the big stories in Contenders China, I think is what I was trying to make content on at the time. The next one was analysis. Some of these have actually been cut out and stuck in from another book. Again, this is where we just have like the really dense pages of writing, a lot of different colors. I don't know how I managed to make my handwriting so small for these pages, but holy shit. And I would do this, so I would like go through the games writing all these notes, and then I would do these big colorful summaries at the end, so that like I had the actual information that I really needed at the end, and I could like refer to the more in-depth notes if I needed to. And then the next one was mid-game. So this would be like when I was casting, when I was on broadcast, these were the notes that I would make like in the middle of the broadcast. And these are like truly ugly because some of them are just like this. Like some of them are just like so huge and gross. I mean, some of them were a little bit nicer like this. I'm not convinced this was in the middle of a cast, but you know, maybe I'm wrong. And then at the end I have hero profiles, which was just me writing a lot of statistics, because in Overwatch, unlike any other game that I've worked in actually, it was kind of normal to just know all of the statistics for like the different abilities of everyone. So I suppose it's kind of like that in Valorant too, but like I knew like all these statistics and I wanted to fucking know them as well. So this notebook's so pretty. I love this one. This was around the time that I started ow! This is around the time that I started like really getting serious about wanting to get into Rainbow Six. So I started doing all these analysis notes. This is G2 versus Zizou from Rainbow Six Pro League. And again, so this is like perfectly exemplifies. I used to draw all of these maps so that I could actually draw out what was happening in the game, which became so incredibly impractical. So we have the Canada Nationals, is the same thing here. I've got all of these little like drawings that I would do and it would take forever. We have some Call of Duty ones as well, which also came with their own drawings. Oh, wow. Okay, so this is when I would write analysis for the Korean Pro League of Rainbow Six, but I would also write down like all of the Korean vocabulary, because I was learning Korean like quite seriously at the time. So I would write down all the Korean vocabulary. I would write down all of the round like names and shit in Korean. So I was trying really hard to like really sort of like amalgamate with that. A lot of like composition tables of like different operators that teams were playing, because I was trying to like get used to what the meta was. I started doing this where, so I did this like villa analysis, and instead of drawing everything out, I just like drew all this in MS Paint and printed it all off and just stuck them in, which was, I found so much easier. Oh my god, there's actually so much in here. I didn't realize how much was in here. Okay, so I think these are possibly some of the prettiest analysis notes I've ever made. This was SSG versus NIP, the 2020 Grand Finals. And I did these very, very, like, just dense essays of analysis. And there are many, many pages of these. I don't know how my hand didn't fall off. Like, this is ridiculous. But yeah, I always thought that those pages looked really nice. And then I basically, like, filled up this notebook, So I want to show how I use my iPad as well. So I use an app called Notability. A lot of people ask me about that. And I have everything in here. So I use the iPad Pro 2020. I bought it brand new in 2020, and it's one of the best purchases I've ever made. I use this for a bunch of different things, but the number of Rainbow Six pages I have in here is 349, and I have 110 Valorant pages in here. And then I have a bunch of other things, which are like content or casting study, which is basically VOD review, stuff like that, that all have their own folders. And then for in the subcategories, I have like which event they are. So we have so like I have these all like separated out, and I want to try and find one that is a good example of how I would use this, because I'm absolutely not showing you everything. So Santos versus Black Dragons. This was just a LATAM League Stage 2 game. So these paragraphs you see here are the notes that I have for the beginning of the cast. So I go into the game with these, and these are basically just basic things about the teams or story notes that I would like to refer to in the cast or be able to talk about at the beginning of the game. And then I would use this template, which I drew, and I would just copy and paste into every single one, which would basically have the map bands, and oftentimes I wasn't fast enough to actually write the map bands in, so that's why they're not here. And then the operator bands, and then we have the map that we're playing, the first defender, and then this is how I would fill this in. So I would have what site it was, who won the site, and if there was a plant. Now here, for example, you see like a tick and a question mark. That would mean that they planted, but there was a defuse. And then there would be a different one, like a cross and a question mark, as if they managed to start planting, but didn't actually finish a plant. So that would kind of tell me how different rounds were won. And then I would write a bunch of different notes. So in this one, there's not actually a ton of notes from like in the cast itself, because like there are some casts where I was just so like in the zone that I just don't write a ton while I'm casting. It's way easier to write notes when you're on the analyst desk than when you're actually casting, in my opinion. But there were definitely some... Okay, so on this one, it literally just says fuck rehosts. Not the perfect example. Don't want to go through all of them, but like I would write a different amount on each one. Some of them I would write a ton on. Usually I would remember it well enough to be able to talk about it in the post game. My problem is that I have a terrible memory, so that once the game was over, I would instantly forget everything that happened in the game. So if I didn't write any notes in the game itself, I basically couldn't talk about the game after that. So that was a habit that I had to really try and break and ensure I was writing stuff down, even if it was after the game happened, because like for me, I just really struggle with that. It's a big pathological problem that I have. And then when we look at Valorant ones, for example, so if I go on to Masters Berlin, is probably the best. So for example, I'm actually going to like zoom this out. Crew versus Zeta Division. So I would write notes for the pre-game, like to go here. I would type some things up and highlight them, and so that's what's pasted into here, which I had typed up from a different document. Like it was where I had written up notes about a Zeta Division game on a previous game, and I could just copy and paste them over into this one. And then these are the notes that I would like make during the game per each map. And at the end of each map, usually what I would do is I would go through and I would like draw a box around like which notes I specifically wanted to talk about on the desk, because like every note that you make in the game, you're not going to be able to speak about. So it would kind of be like I would write down the notes that I wanted or that I was coming up with, and then I would... So this is a good example, right? So this one, I have a box around here, and that just basically meant that's what I wanted to speak about on the desk. The reason I draw a box around it is so that when it comes to my time to speak, I know where to immediately look on my screen, and I'm not sat there like searching for it for ages, because that would be super embarrassing. This is also a really good one. This is F4Q versus Sentinels. So there was a ton of pre-game there, and then like some stats from previous games, and then just a lot of notes on this particular map, actually. This was split. And sometimes like I just won't write notes about one of the maps if it's really boring, and especially if I already have like really good stuff I want to speak about from another map. And I have like some study ones. So for example, there's a Valorant study page here. C9 versus Sentinels NAVCT VOD review. When was this from? 27th of April 2021. So actually this was when I first wanted to get into Valorant. This must have been like the first Valorant analysis I ever did. And yeah, I just like wrote a bunch of this. This dark green box is almost definitely a summary of something. And obviously this is really like zoomed out just so that you can see it better, but yeah, so like I also use my iPad for all of the study and stuff like that, and I have some other things on there. You know, as I say, I have the casting study where, especially in Rainbow Six, like for example, this was okay, well, it doesn't actually say who was casting this, but it was NA, so I assume this is going to be Kix and Intero, and I'd write down things that they said and I would make notes on them. And so this was how I, you know, was trying to improve a lot on certain things. I mean, when I say it was Kicks in Terror, it was almost definitely just Kickstar, because I didn't, like, as a color caster, I didn't really give a shit what it was that Parker was saying, because that's not my, he doesn't do the same role as me. And yeah, so I would do a lot of stuff like this and just study other casters and make a lot of notes on that. I still use my iPad, but mostly just for work. Like, for just doing VOD review at home, or like watching games or making content, I've actually gone back to wanting to use notebooks more. Mostly because I have so many files in that app that it can run slow sometimes. So I mostly try to just use that for work, like if I'm actually at an event, if I'm actually casting something. So I have a couple of other things here. So one of them is like this really ugly reporter's notebook, which is just where I would like scribble down notes. And I just wanted to show that to prove that not everything that I use is pretty. I also have this. So this is called Words 2.0. And a lot of people tell me I have a really good vocabulary, which I really appreciate, because it's something that I work really hard at. But what I do is when I learn new words, I write them. Oh, okay, so let me start from the beginning. The best way that I learn new words is by reading. And so, for example, take any book that I'm reading. If I come across a word that I don't know, I will write it in the front. And then I will go and look up all of those words that I've written in the front. And if you look at any of the books that I've read over the last 3 years, like, they'll be covered in words. And any words that I think would be useful in my job and relevant to esports, I write on this list and with the definition, and I make an effort to try and use it. So the reason this is Words 2.0 is because I have the original Words one here. So I have like 5 pages of words here, and I just kind of keep these on my desk. I actually haven't written a new page in a little while, but this is something that I feel quite strongly about. Like, you have to make an effort to improve your vocabulary. I think reading is the best way to do that. And yeah, so that's what this is. And I consider that part of my notes because it's, you know, something that I go out of my way to do to improve my job. And then the current notebook that I'm using is this. And I mostly was like, I'm going to use this for content, but I've been using it a lot for VOD review as well. A lot of this is like, I was writing down like content that I really enjoy. This were like the original designs for, like, I was trying to come up with an idea for the Bombshell logo, and stuff like that. And then we have like VOD reviews. So this is, you know, watching VCT games, and I would write like round by round things. Now this is obviously all in just like biro. There is not as much like crazy colors or anything like that. What I would do is at the end of each half, I would just write a little conclusion about like points that I felt about the team's play styles. And even over the course of having this notebook, I've tried really hard to make the way that I write about games way more concise, because I didn't want to just write a play-by-play. That's not very useful. I was more interested in trying to just write down things that were interesting. But for me as an analyst, I've always really had a preference for finding patterns in the way that people play. So like their overall play style, what is a habit that they are repeating? I don't usually care as much about individual really impressive plays. I know that that is something that is worth focusing on for a number of people, but for me that's just not like where my real interest lies. So it's mostly like trying to, you know, find things like that. I wrote this page called Looking Up To, which I have always very infamously never looked up to anybody. I've always looked up just to myself because I don't want to be idolizing anyone else. I just want to do what I'm doing. But there are certain people in like esports who I think it's humbling to look at things other people are doing and see value in that and try and find ways that you can grow based on what other people are doing. So it was just something that, especially when I was having like a bit of a rough time, just trying to like remind myself of and whatever, and writing down why I value things that, you know, these other people are doing. Again, like just way more VOD review. A lot of the VOD review in here is just like less pretty than in other ones, because a lot of the time I'm just like scribbling this down while watching a game. And I'm gonna be honest, like, I don't enjoy sitting and writing notes while watching a VOD. Like, I am really bad at concentrating at just sitting and watching something. So yeah, a lot of these are a lot less pretty. The talk show I've been doing with Thorin, like I'd write down notes for things that I wanted to talk about. I'd have like a content plan here, which I usually just write in my like diary. I have like an actual diary where I plan everything out. So I've kind of stopped just writing content plans in here. Yeah, I'm just picking random pages to show really, because so many of these pages look exactly the fucking same. So this is an example actually of when I'm like really being in a rush. Like this is Optic versus C9 and my handwriting is just a total mess. Like I'm writing really small things. Or like this, for example. I was almost definitely streaming when this game was on because I cannot stream and write proper notes at the same time. So I only have a little bit actually left of this notebook, so I'm gonna have to get a new one soon. But unless I have forgotten a notebook that is lying around my bedroom, because I've got a bunch of notebooks still here. I don't think any of them are esports notebooks, and I have a ton on my bookshelf. But unless I'm forgetting something, that is a complete tour of my history of esports analysis notes. I hope that gives an interesting insight into the way that I've approached my work over the last few years, why I make these like crazy notes. A lot of people say, why'd you bother doing that? Like I have very specific ways I think about it and that it helps me. And also just for those of you who are curious and always ask me about my notes, I hope that this actually like gave you something or maybe satiated your curiosity a little bit. Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see what people think, and I hope it gives a little bit of insight into kind of how much goes in behind the scenes, and even at times where, especially in like my Rainbow Six era, at the very beginning of it, a lot of people didn't really trust that I was cared enough or put in the work. I hope this kind of shows that I really, really do care about my job, and I do everything I possibly can to put in as much work as I possibly can to constantly improve and be learning. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.